today's webinar. Today's presenter is Natalie, Waite, Account Manager at Sagittarius. The webinar will last 1 hour and will consist of a 30 to 45-minute webinar and 15 minutes of questions. Just some housekeeping before we begin. I'll be taking questions at the end of the 45 minutes, so please can I ask you to type any questions that you may have into the questions box within the webinar portal, and we will answer these at the end. All of today's slides and a recording of today's session will also be shared with you after the event and will be available on our YouTube channel to watch afterwards. Today's webinar is ready to begin, so if that's okay with you, I'll hand over to Natalie.
Lovely, thank you, Sarah. So, pretty punchy title for a webinar, but more bang for your buck. But it got your attention, and hopefully the rest of the content will retain it. So let me introduce myself and give you a brief overview of what we'll be covering in the webinar this afternoon. This afternoon, I'm going to run through a load of ways in which you can utilize Sitecore to drive your ROI. So, okay, my name is Natalie Waite, and I am an account manager here at Sagittarius and strategic and SBOSS consultant. I work with a variety of clients and platforms in many different capacities, from managing design and builds of new Sitecore sites to strategic consultancy and SBOSS workshops. My experience is quite broad and varied, having worked in buying jewellery to strategic marketing in automotive industry and working across verticals here at Sagittarius. But the constant is working with the relationship between consumers and their path to purchase. So working with QVC in buying jewellery, you realise very quickly that you can't just, unless you promote your product really well, it may not sell. It may not your users may not have the appetite or the desire to buy it. So we'll come back to how Sitecore can help with the effective marketing of your product or services. But for those attendees who are not familiar with us, allow me to introduce the agency to you. So who are we? We are Sagittarius. We are a full-service digital agency, and by that I mean we cover the disciplines of digital marketing and design and development of websites and applications. Here are a few of the clients that we've worked with specifically on the Sitecore platform, and this has varied in capacity from the conception and design and build of a new Sitecore platform through to recovery projects. And we've also worked with a lot of these clients in a consultancy capacity. So that could be across development, infrastructure, strategy, and working with them on our SBOSS program with them. So Sagittarius is actually one of the few agencies that have actually built websites that utilise the Sitecore DMS, and we're also one of the few agencies that have experience in strategy and implementation of personalisation and marketing automation. As it happens, we're also one of the very few agencies to have a Sitecore MVP specific to digital strategy. So that's one of 4 in the country, and that is Nick Towers. So enough about that, and let's move on to the reason you're all here. So I'm going to start off by talking about where Sitecore really fits into the marketing funnel. I think in our previous webinars and other blogs and conversations, we've really focused on contextual marketing and profiles and personas, but we're going to sort of take a step back and look at Sitecore and how it can actually help with your marketing ROI. So if you have worked with Sitecore, or if you're in the process of acquiring the Sitecore platform, you will more than likely have seen this customer experience maturity model. And this is really around how mature your business or organization is from an implementation perspective, and how you move through the different stages of digital maturity to build lifelong and loyal customers. And we then move on to how you utilize different tools and methods and channels to actually move you along that maturity model, from the attract stage to the convert stage and through to the advocate stage. As you move through, the way in which you utilize each of these different channels and methods will start to evolve, so that you can communicate more seamlessly and in context to the requirements of your customers and the stage that they are at with your brand and your product. So how does Sitecore actually help you with that? So as a platform, Sitecore can be used to communicate across multiple channels. So at the very top here, we've got Sitecore, the website, which is the CMS area of it. Sitecore also has the ability to send out emails related to your website through EXM. It can send out social content through Confo. Obviously, you have your mobile version of the website and multiple applications. We recently saw the launch of Sitecore Commerce, which means you can tie up all of your commerce customers into your Sitecore platform and therefore benefit from the personalisation capabilities of Sitecore. And print and federated experience, which also enables you to track the performance of your customers on other sites. So underpinning that really is all the information that we can take away from all of those elements and the way in which that your users are working with you on your website. So Sitecore utilises all of that information and applies it to its analytics, which delivers insights, which enables you to make more informed decisions and ultimately leads to automated marketing. And what underpins that is all of the information about the customer, but we can also feed in lots of other data from your CRMs, for example, with Salesforce and Microsoft Dynamics. So that's kind of Sitecore and the platform, but I'm conscious that this is marketing related, so I'm going to take it back a little bit to Google's Zero Moment of Truth, which is a method that you are more than likely to know about. But in short, Google's Zero Moment of Truth touches on the fact that years ago, before there was internet, it was said that there was 3 stages that a buyer went through. There was the stimulus, which is the need or desire for a product. The first moment of truth, which is where they actually physically see the product in store for the first time on a shelf. And the second moment of truth is when they actually get it home and start to use that product. From there, they can actually make assumptions and decide whether or not they wish to utilize your product or services again. Obviously, with internet now, there's a much bigger gap between the stimulus and the first moment of truth, and there's a lot of opportunity for your customers to research products and services, and essentially you need to be in the right place at the right time with the right message, and that is called the Zero Moment of Truth. So moving on to how that relates. So the way in which I like to look at it, is looking at the consumer relationship with you and your brand. So that is the stimulus and research area. And we can use loads of different tools to create that need or desire for a product. We ultimately then need to get them onto your website, which is where they'll move through to the compare and decide stage. And if we do a good job on the website, they'll hopefully turn into a purchase, and that could be via an online transaction, an online booking, an online deposit, or if you are a lead generation website, it would result in leads. They then get to their first moment of truth, which is use, and now they have the ability to share their feedback and their review of your product and service. Ultimately, what we want them to do is then go up to the top and move through to the evangelize stage. And typically we do that with lots of content marketing. And then we start to target them again to get them back through to the stimulus. So where does the Google Zero Moment of Truth sit into this? So obviously the stimulus is the same, it sits there. And again, there's loads of ways we can create that need or desire. So for example, through the use of SkyAd Smart Digital Ads. And if you're an early adopter, then you might be utilizing Shazam to link up the television ad to your online presence. Zero moment of truth is really the key part, and this is where we're pushing users to your website. That's where loads of the money is spent. And then obviously we've got the website itself, so that needs to function in the best way that it can in order to push them through to the purchase stage, which is the first moment of truth. And then their second moment of truth, which is where they get the product home. So as I mentioned, we typically spend loads of money, thousands of pounds, pushing users to our website. Now, if our website isn't converting properly, then ultimately all of that money is kind of going to waste and we're losing lots of conversions. We then typically spend a lot of money communicating with those users, typically pushing content to them, which is potentially not necessarily relevant or in context. And typically this is where the website sits. So let's get back to how Sitecore can help. And really what we're doing in this webinar is going to look at how Sitecore can be utilised to drive that marketing ROI and leverage all of that spend and make it more efficient and turn those dropouts into conversions. So I'm going to break it down into 4 main areas here. So we've got a quick look at conversion tools, a little bit about contextual intelligence, a bit about automated marketing, and some information on informed decisions. So conversion tools. So when we're talking about conversion tools, what we're talking about is not necessarily how we get to the conversion tool itself, because in order to do that, we need to understand why we need it. What is the problem? Where are the users dropping out? How many users? Who are they? And what can we do to convert them? Is it something to do with the device, and so on? Which leads to understanding how we fix the problem. But what I'm going to quickly touch on is just a few conversion tools that you can utilize relatively quickly and simple on site to help maximize the conversation and also ensure better conversions, easier site usage, and so on. So the first one I'm going to talk about is social login. Now, I don't know about you, but I seem to have so many different logins. They're all versions of the same thing, but typically I forget them because I might have left off an exclamation mark or something. So that's what I would typically call password fatigue. By utilizing social connect on your website, you can actually just ask users to log in via their social media logins, for example, Facebook. And the benefit of that is that there's one set of data for your users to remember, but also it means that you will be receiving lots of updated information as your users tend to update their social profiles a lot more frequently than they would your profile specifically to your business. So that benefits you as well, because it means that you have got the opportunity for more targeted marketing. So here's just an example of how ASOS are using it. So they have 2 options, new to ASOS and then already registered with ASOS. And it's suggested that 88% of users admit to entering incomplete or incorrect data on registration forms, which is obviously something that can be detrimental to your business. The next one I'm just going to touch on is live chat. And this is one of the conversion tools that I've had really good experience with in the past, by simply turning live chat on, even if it's from 9 to 5 p.m. and not a 24-hour service. I've seen conversions double and increase by over 120% in some cases. I've also seen those conversions increase significantly by extending the period of time that your live chat service is available. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you guys have to be there available to respond. There are lots of services that can outsource that piece of work for you. You can have all of the responses scripted and so on and so forth. But just as an example, you can see here that 63% of users are more likely to return to a website that does offer live chat. And typically, I've also found that this conversion tool, live chat, is actually really beneficial for those websites that aren't necessarily an e-commerce site, but more of a lead generation site. So UX and mobile. So what do I mean by this really? I mean, obviously your mobile site is a part of your desktop site, that's true. And what we have seen is moving away from having two separate sites, a desktop site and a mobile site, and moving into adaptive. But now what we're saying is it's not really enough to be adaptive anymore. We have to be responsive. And by that, I mean changing the way in which the website functions and is laid out according to a mobile user. So for example, they're going to be using their thumbs, so make the way in which the scroll works different. So I'm just going to give you an example here of one of our clients, Kentucky. As you can see on the desktop site, we're using a mouse to click, so there's the and also the screen's a lot larger, so there's a lot of opportunity to display the information a lot more broadly. On mobile, we obviously are reliant on thumbs and scrolling, so we've actually changed the way in which the page moves and functions to suit your users' needs. The next one I'm going to briefly mention is ratings and reviews. And there are loads of providers out there that can help you with this. So as an example, FIFO or Revu, but these add so much value to your brand because they offer independent reviews, and customers typically rely on independent reviews a lot more than they would potentially your own information, because it is independent. And 65% of us would choose a business that responds to reviews. So with that in mind, I'm just going to give you a quick example of Adidas, who are doing it really well. It's one thing to respond to a review that's got 1 star or 2 stars, or somebody that's not happy, and that is really essential. But Adidas are doing it really well because they're actually responding to those users that have got 5-star reviews. So that's really opening up a two-way conversation. And in terms of reviews, the benefits actually extend your website and reach into your other marketing channels. So for example, your organic stars. Good reviews can lead directly into Google with your rich snippets. You can utilize reviews across your PPC in seller ratings, and this can actually boost click-through rates by 17%, and therefore those click-throughs that are coming through are going to be of a higher quality to you as well. So it's improving your AdWords quality score. I'm going to move on from that onto the next part, which is contextual intelligence. And this is really about the way in which you're communicating with your customers, ensuring that you're delivering the right message to the right customer at the right time via the right channel. So we were saying content is king, but I'm saying context is king. It's important, obviously, to have lots of content and essential content about your products and services and so on. But actually, what we're seeing now is that that content needs to be in context to the user and your customer, and making sure that you're delivering the right content at the right time, depending on their relationship with you and how far through the funnel they are. Your marketing can become a lot more effective when you take into account the context of your customers. So how can we do that? And we can do that by identifying users and their behavior. Every user will move around your website differently and have different intentions in mind. But there are 2 types of behavior that we can actually take from Sitecore and utilize and apply it to our marketing messages. Firstly, there's implicit behavior. Now, this is really the qualitative information that we're getting as users are moving around your website. It's the things that attribute as they move through the pages and hit different landing pages and different types of content. There's then explicit behaviour, which is the stuff that is known, it's obvious, and we're told. So, for example, it could be a referring site, or we would know that the users come in from a specific campaign. So we have some identification of what they're trying to do and what they're trying to achieve on your website. And Sitecore uses goals and profiles to help with identifying those different types of behaviour and assigning them to your users. So there's goals and engagements. So goals are essentially the actions and touch points that your users hitting on your website, and you can attribute different values to those. So you can start to understand which of your users offer the most value to your business versus those that are just moving around your website. There's profiles and personas, which is used to establish the type of user, the type of product they're looking for, or where they are in the purchase funnel. And ultimately, those two things combined lead to your personalisation strategy, which delivers much improved ROI and can deliver up to 19% improved conversions. And we can assist with understanding what your goals and engagements are, who your profiles and personas are, and how you can set that up. And we typically do that through the SBOSS program, which is a series of workshops that we can deliver, and it offers you a framework to work to in the future. But I'm going to move on from goals and profiles and personas because my colleague Ruth has covered a lot of this already, so I don't want to cover old ground, but also we've got a lot more to cover. So if you're interested in more, I'd advise that you check out Ruth's webinars, Path to Personalisation and Introduction to CRO. She's also got loads of content on her area of the website, and she's also done a vlog on actually what is SBOSS and how it can help you. So getting back to that 360-degree customer view. So as we know, you're more than likely to have lots of data sets, and you're communicating with your customer in loads of different ways. You're getting data from your PPC campaigns, from your CRM, from social media, from all sorts of places, but also your customer is receiving lots of different messages from you from multiple different places. It's also worth noting at this point that with GDPR in the mix, all of that data stored in multiple different places is something that should start to be considered really, and how you can bring that into one environment. And Sitecore really offers you that linchpin between each of these different data sets, and also the context around those data sets and how you can assign it to different users. So you can use all of this information to set up personalisation rules. And to do that, there's kind of a load of prerequisites that we need in place to enable the personalisation and the tracking of users and the data and the different types of behaviour. So as an example, from a platform perspective, you'll need Sitecore XDB in place. Typically you'll need Mongo database in order to be able to store all of that information. Your Sitecore site should be set up in a componentized fashion, so you can enable that personalization of components to change the messaging as users hit the pages. In turn, you will need to address your hosting because obviously that's a lot of data to be storing. So to ensure that you don't have any performance issues with your site, your servers need to be set up correctly. There can be additional costs if you want to start targeting by GeoIP or device detection. And the other thing really to consider is the resource. It does take time for this profiling, the SBOSS program, and you do need quite a lot of content in order to change the tone of voice and the context and change the different components. So there is an investment there. So more informed decisions. So as I've said, there's loads of data coming through, loads of behavioural data, loads of goals and engagements, and Sitecore actually stores all of this and has it to hand in lots of different reportings. And And it means that you can take top-level reporting such as this, but also you can utilize the experience analytics to dive a little bit deeper and understand the patterns that your users are moving through. And it means that you can help your business move through the maturity model, by understanding how the users are moving through your website, the different types of patterns or personas are actually converting and those that aren't, and then understand why. And you can understand why through the path analyzer. And this really relates back to the engagement values, because those big green dots are those ones that have got lots of engagement values. And if you are looking at this path analyzer and you're noticing that your users are moving through a pathway and there's loads of them, there's a big green dot, but actually there's nothing beyond that, that is suggestive that there is a blockage there. And that could be a key area for you to investigate and look at in terms of conversion rate optimization. Is it that the content is wrong? Is it that you need a conversion tool in place? And so on. But this path analyzer is really useful because it helps you identify who's engaging with your site and by what value. In terms of the experience profile, again, this is really useful because certainly if you've got your CRM tied up to Sitecore platform, because it offers user-specific information, so you can see how many times the users landed on your website, which patterns they most closely match, which goals they're hitting, are they a user that's got a high engagement value but haven't yet converted. And this is really useful, particularly if you have a client services team that talk directly to your users, and you've also got your CRM information feeding through into this, because if they're on the phone, they can get an idea of who the person is and how they need to communicate with them more effectively. So that's the reporting. So let's move on to marketing automation. So in an ideal world, this is feet up marketing. Let's just let Sitecore get on with it. We'll tell it what to do and then we don't need to do anything. Well, that would be ideal, but in reality, there's a lot more to it. And what underpins it really is the infrastructure and the setup of your Sitecore platform. So at the very basic level, we have the platform itself and the databases. There's MongoDB with all its customer data in it. And if you are an e-commerce store, you might have something like UCommerce plugged in. And that will ultimately develop and lead to your website and responsive states of that. As I've mentioned before, Sitecore can also feed through email campaigns using EXM. But if you don't want to utilize EXM, you can always set up a two-way connector with such software providers as Campaign Monitor. You can also plug in your CRM information, as I've suggested, via API, for example, with Microsoft Dynamics. You can also use Sitecore to track the way in which users are moving around other third-party websites. So, for example, if you happen to have two websites that, if you were a travel agency, for example, you had one for your flights and one for your holidays, you might have two separate websites, but you want to track that same user. So you can utilize FXM to be able to do that. You may also have some other APIs that are feeding out to other marketing disciplines such as native ads and stuff like that. And then obviously you're going to have all of your social streams feeding into your website. So all of that information can be used and tied up, and your different marketing channels can be integrated in one way or another and can be utilized with Sitecore's engagement plans. An engagement plan is a predefined plan that lets you control how your website is interacting with visitors. You can use engagement plans to nurture the relationships with your visitors by adapting the communication and the use of content across the different channels and media and so on. And ultimately, you can set up an engagement plan, which is essentially a pathway in which you're trying to push your user through, and that is based on different states of the user and different conditions and rules and things like that. So it's actually a really, really useful tool, but this is way down the path. There's a lot to set up before that, as I've discussed. So how can you get going with this? So I've discussed, you know, what is the ultimate infrastructure, having everything tied in, all these APIs, FXM, EXM, all the XMs. But what if you don't have this in place? What if you've just got your website, or you've had your website for a long time, but you aren't making use of all this functionality? Is there a way around it? Do you feel a little bit like you were sold the dream and now you've got to set up all that infrastructure and you've got to do a load of profiling, write a load of content, which essentially is going to equate to a lot of time? Well, there is a way around it in the short term, and that is in the form of the campaign code. So Sitecore, you can use Sitecore in the same way you do Google, for example, with campaign code, so you can actually track campaigns and ultimately change elements on the site or land users on a different page or track them in the reporting tools and so on. And you can use the campaign creator here to capture your campaign codes. So I'm just going to give you a quick example of a very basic way in which you might be able to do this. It's a bit arduous and disjointed, but as a first step, as a short-term solution or a way to help proof of concept, this is a good example, and actually campaign codes are really useful. So in this example, I'm going to say the user's been delivered a targeted email, and that has attributed a Sitecore campaign code. Okay, so the user lands on the landing page with that campaign code. That campaign code activates a component to change its messaging according to the campaign that they've come from. So that page is now highly relevant to what they're looking at. The user in this instance actually doesn't purchase or make a lead at this instance, and they leave your website, as lots of users do. I used to work in retargeting, and Google said that 98% of users will leave your website without making a purchase or a lead or an acquisition or anything like that. So retargeting is one of my favorite marketing tools because it can re-engage your users, bring them back to the website and retain that communication. Now, we know that that user has received a targeted email, they've landed on a page, and all of this has been specific to a campaign. If you're using something like a provider like Criteo, you can have page-specific targeting or even tool-specific targeting. So, for example, if a user put an item of clothes into their basket but didn't actually finish the purchase, you can use Criteo retargeting to retarget them specific to that product, specific to the phase in the purchase funnel they are. So that delivers a specific message according to the campaign and how far through the funnel they are. With that retargeting campaign, we can add on an additional or a different Sitecore campaign code. They will land on a new landing page, and that we can again change a component based on how far through the funnel they are and tailor that communication. Criteo's retargeting is also really useful because it's quite broad, because they use firstly they use dynamic retargeting, so you can have product specifically that the users looked at, or you can have general retargeting if it's campaign led, but they also offer retargeting that spans your different social channels, so Facebook and Instagram. They also do email retargeting and so on. Anyway, I'm going to move on from that, but that can improve your conversion rate, but also it means that you can kind of start to tie up the pathway. So my top tips for increasing or marketing ROI and leveraging all of that spend. Tip 1, reduce the silos. So this is kind of a twofold element or tip really, because I'm aware that there are big organizations out there that have got multiple data sets, customer data in loads of different places, but it's not necessarily tying together, so you're losing loads of opportunity. Furthermore, with GDPR coming into play, there's a much longer audit trail. So if a customer says that they don't want you to have their information or hide their information or change it, there's so many different places that you're going to have to be looking for their data. The next side of that is reducing the silos, is breaking down those walls between the marketing department and your developers, because I've noticed with some of our large clients, there's a big gap, or there's a big conflict between who owns the website, who's responsible for moving it forwards, the strategy behind it, and so on. To break down those barriers, reduce those silos, because it's going to lead to a lot more opportunity. My second tip is really to set the right foundations. If you think about building a house, you wouldn't lay a foundation that's unstable. You would make sure that you've set the foundations right so that you can build your house properly. And by that I mean, make sure you've got the right infrastructure. Have you got the right hosting? Are your servers big enough to support the amount of data that you've got in there without affecting performance? This also relates to the way in which your website is built. And that means if you want to really make the use of personalisation and marketing automation, ensuring your website is built in a componentized fashion is pretty much essential too. Number 3, bring in the professionals. And that kind of relates to the fact that, you know, there are agencies, us, I would have to say, we can actually help you and your teams upskill and share knowledge, support your teams and help you understand how you can kind of bring all of that information together. What is this correct setup for infrastructure? How can we assist developers? And we can do this in loads of different ways, in different capacities, as I sort of gave you an example at the very beginning with our different clients. 4 is prepare to fail. And this is really related to testing and A/B split testing, multivariate testing. Be prepared to fail and take those failings as learnings and use those learnings to develop new strategies and new ways of talking to your consumers, because ultimately their expectations and the way in which they want to talk to you is changing and evolving. Number 5 is be ready to invest. And by that, I'm not referring to money, you need to give us all your money, that sort of thing. I'm referring to invest time into the strategy, time into what your goals are, who is your customer, what are the profiles, what is it that they want from you. Invest that time, and that will lead into more time required to write content specific to them and their context. So they're my top 5 tips. So be a swan. With Sitecore, everything's integrated into the platform itself, whereas other providers might utilize plugins and bolt-ins, which might seem cheaper from the outset, but essentially it doesn't lead to a seamless way of working, and it can reduce the return on all of your integrations. So that's kind of it from me in terms of the presentation. So I now welcome any questions that you have. So I'm just going to hand back over to Sarah.
Okay, thanks, Natalie. I do have a few questions here from some of the attendees from today. First question is, what do you think is the most valuable asset in Sitecore? Would you say this is kind of setting up goals and engagement scores, for example?
I would say the first thing that you need to do is get those goals set up and goals and engagement values set up. Understand who your users are, the profiles and personas, but really get the goals in, because you can start to use those goals to drive other marketing efforts and understand who your most valuable customers are. And also you can use it to, on the path analyzer, as I showed earlier on, you can start to understand where those high value users are going, but maybe not converting, and that can lead into other conversion strategies.
Okay, thank you. And the last question, the other question that I have is, which one of the Sitecore tools do you personally feel delivers the best ROI in terms of marketing?
In terms of marketing ROI, I would have to say the campaign code, really. I know it's quite a simple, basic one, but you can really use it at the very basic level, and it can be used to change messaging components, and it can be used in a variety of different ways. And if you're at a point now where you haven't actually got any personalization set up or any automated marketing set up, you can actually use it as a proof of concept to move forwards, to get sign off on the investment of time and buy-in, really, from your company to move you through that path to personalization, and ultimately get a better context of who your consumers are and drive that ROI.
Okay, thanks, Natalie. That's all the questions that we have from today. So I will just ask Natalie to put her next slide up. So if you want to get in touch, that's our contact details. You can give us a call, pop an email to us. You can speak to Natalie directly or any of the rest of the team here. Thank you for attending today's webinar. The presentation from today and the slides will be shared with you later on this week. And we look forward to you joining our next webinar. Thanks a lot for attending.